Hey there, this is Toasty Fresh, and welcome to what will hopefully be the first of many podcasts that I'll be doing and just talking about various things. Mostly it's going to be video games, so hopefully fans and members of the video games community will get involved and put your thoughts onto these videos as well and join in the discussions that I'll be making. And the discussion for this video is going to be video game soundtracks. Now, I got onto this idea for doing a podcast because I was flicking through Twitter and someone shared a video from an kind of famous intellectual called Lisa Jardine, who'd sadly passed away, and somebody put up her episode on the Desert Island Discs, which is a show on BBC Radio 4, and it's a kind of thing where people get 8 tracks together that have defined their life really, and what they would take to a desert island with them if they could only take 8 musical tracks. And it got me thinking of what would be my video games equivalent of the desert island discs. So just going off sounds from movies, I mean not movies, video games. And thinking about that, I thought I'd change the rules a little bit, and instead of just having a single track, make it the whole soundtrack of a certain game. And I've limited myself to 5 just for time's sake, really. And plus, for various reasons, the fact that I didn't have a lot of games growing up, and the games are going to be mainly from my growing up childhood into adolescence, not as much the recent stuff. But to be honest, most of the stuff that had a big impact on me has come from that time as well. And as well, it was on the kind of music that I would still listen to now, and I could listen to as music. So you got to remember, these are soundtracks as well, not just on the games themselves. And the first one up, without further ado, is Final Fantasy VII. Would be my first soundtrack that'd go into my Desert Island thing, and that's because it was a benchmark game, a really big game in the history of video games as a whole, and not just for the Sony PlayStation console and their whole brand as it exists now. Would have been very different maybe if they wouldn't have gotten Final Fantasy. And it was just, to forget everything else about the game, the soundtrack was absolutely amazing. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Nobuo Uematsu, who was the producer of all the Final Fantasy's music up until Final Fantasy X, when 2 other composers came in, and I can't really give you their names without looking them up on Wikipedia. He produced all the music for the Final Fantasy series, and he did an absolutely amazing job. Every single track fit in with that location, with the feel of what was going on, with what the characters were going through, and they had real emotional depth to the tracks. They actually, sparked your emotion and got you involved in what was going on in the game. And the soundtrack was that special that I still remember the game fondly, and partly that I think was down to the soundtrack, not just the game. It was the overall sound, like the main theme when you heard it when you left Midgar for the first time. But just every track, all the tracks, even the ones around the slums in Midgar, they fit into that environment. Just everything about the soundtrack was absolute quality, from the limitations of the kind of things that he was using as well, that it wasn't, at the high level of what audio is like now on some of the later Final Fantasies. But it was still a step up from what had been before that. The second soundtrack that I'm going to pick is Tekken II, and I picked that one because I owned all 3 Tekkens for my PlayStation 1, but just down to pure soundtrack reasons, I'd probably say as the overall fighting game, it'd probably be Tekken 3. But going off the soundtrack, Tekken 2 has to be my pick because more or less down to a track, it was an amazing soundtrack. And again, for the kind of same reasons, they fit the sound, they fit the backgrounds, they fit the characters, and the overall feel of each level really, really well. The Namco sound team did some amazing work. An honourable mention as well to Soul Blade, because that was an amazing soundtrack. But I think on being strict, I've gone for this one though, because even though I had more fun with Soul Blade as well as a game as to play it, that would be my favourite, and the intro was amazing. But Tekken 2, they just had King's Level, the dramatic church stage was amazing, the traditional Japanese instruments mixed with a techno vibe for Yoshimitsu's forest level, the understated Hihachi level, which is a real slow burner, was good. Even the ones that aren't so strong really fit into the character, like Jack's level, which isn't one of my personal favourites, but it still very much fits into his character. And eventually, when it gets going, it's not a bad soundtrack. Michelle Chang's is the one that kind of gives me that real hit of nostalgia in the pit of my stomach when I hear that one. That one really takes me back to playing that game. But all of the tracks were good, and even an honourable mention to odd ones tracks on Tekken 3, but Tekken 2 has to be my pick of like the fighting games I'm going to put in. And just to take a break from all the Sony stuff, my third choice is Zelda, The Legend of Zelda, The Ocarina of Time, because that again, not to mention, it doesn't need to be said that it's another one of those benchmark games, just as much as Final Fantasy VII was. This was another one of those kind of console-defining almost games for the N64. It would probably be my pick of all the games, alongside Majora's Mask very closely. But because some of the music was kind of similar in Majora's Mask, I've been strict and gone for Ocarina of Time, because it had a real nice pure sound to it, and a lot of the tracks were just it was kind of like a fairy tale kind of brought to life. It really breathed life into the game, and my pick of the tracks were probably the Fairy Fountain. That was just an amazingly magical track, and it's good to have a Nintendo one in there just to break it up. I never owned an N64 at the time, but my brother did, and he'd moved out and got his own place by then. He was like 19, 18 when he moved out, and I still used to keep in contact with him, and I'd go around at the weekends and stay over, and we'd play video games, playing all kinds of things, like from my PlayStation games and things like that. And the Zelda games were two of the ones that I really have fond memories of playing. And again, I still listen to the tracks every now and again, and they still give me that nice nostalgia hit. So that's why that one's in there. And then going back to a series we've already done, and we've already actually mentioned, it's Final Fantasy X. I had to put this one in because it was another one that it's really close up there with Final Fantasy VII for being my favourite game soundtrack of all time. Again, every track fit in with the action, the scenes of what were going on, what the characters were feeling, what situation they were in. It conveyed that really well. Like I said, this was the first time that the producer Uematsu had worked with other people, but it still had that great kind of Final Fantasy feel to it. But every song was good. The songs on Besaid Island were some of my favourites. The really good one when you're in the village and it's got the acoustic guitars, like a tandem of acoustic guitars. That was a really good, like, little chilled out soundtrack. And also the other one when you go into the village was a good one as well. but just all of them were good. Like one of my other personal favourites is when you've just left Macalania Forest and you get that last music, and it's just that kind of great plateau where you've just been through a stage, got through all the enemies, and it's a safe zone. You know, there's going to be no random battles, and you can just relax and enjoy the music and listen to the great soundtracks that have been made. And like I said again, it was just that kind of Final Fantasy trademark of, they've got the number one spot of having the best soundtracks in games history. And Uematsu is up there as being the top composer in video games history. In my book, I'll probably say that he is the top. I mean, I've not played every game ever yet, so I can't use it in authority, but that's my opinion. And then moving on to my final pick, which was a really hard one. It's actually nailed down to just one, but I'm going to pick Vice City because it could have very easily been San Andreas, due to it being in the early 90s and having that New Jack swing and the early 90s hip hop, and all the other music from that time. It was the time of me growing up, so it's got that kind of feeling of my childhood, early years, moving into adolescence. But I had to go with Vice City because it just has that great 80s soundtrack. Even though they're not all of them the top, most recognisable songs from the 80s, it's just laced with all these brilliant hits, and some of them big hits, some of them cult hits, but the way they just mesh together and make this absolutely amazing soundtrack. So it just makes the game a joy, even when you're not doing anything in particular. You're just driving around in your freshly stolen convertible. You can just do nothing at all, not even mowing pedestrians down, just driving along the neon seafront and listening to various things that are coming out of the radio as you flick through. And not only that, they had some of the best humour that had been put into the games in the radio stations, and that goes across the whole board of Grand Theft Auto 3 as well. I'd have to give that an honourable mention, but it was just an amazingly picked soundtrack, and they was really good at doing it. When it came to San Andreas, like I said, there was some great songs put into that. The Grand Theft Auto series, I had to put Vice City in because it was just one of those that, and I don't know if it's the same with a lot of other people, it sparked off or reignited my interest in certain genres like hip hop with the Curtis Blow and Grandmaster Flash songs, and especially on San Andreas as well, when you got the different groups like Ice Cube and Public Enemy on there, that just really sparked my interest in that kind of music. And there was always songs like Amos Moses. It was a great one which you would have never listened to in a million years if you hadn't have gotten a Grand Theft Auto game. And it was kind of the same with some of the others, like the Curtis Blow song, The Breaks. Would have probably never listened to it maybe if I wouldn't have gotten Vice City. But just all the other songs, there were just some amazing songs on there, and just a great eclectic 80s mix. But there are my picks. Like I said, some honourable mentions go out to San Andreas and Soul Blade that didn't quite make the mix. They had some great orchestral arrangements in that, a badass soundtrack, and an absolutely amazing beginning. And some other ones that just didn't quite make the grade, like another role-playing game, Wild Arms, had an amazing intro and some great music, a kind of westernish kind of thing. But they were my top 5. It was Vice City, Final Fantasy X, Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, Tekken II, and Final Fantasy VII. And I'd really like to know what your picks will be and the reasons you've picked them, because you're going to have a different gaming experience growing up maybe to what I did. Some of the things will be similar, but as with other things, everybody's going to have a slightly different take and different tastes on what you would consider your favourites and what would be your desert island dish. I really look forward to hearing what the replies are going to be. Hopefully this is going to be a good subject to broach and get people from the community talking about it. But that's all I got time for. Hopefully you guys find the time to catch another one of my podcasts next time, or say whether you liked it or not, and whether I should keep on going with this kind of video. But thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll be back very shortly on another subject.